Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, gather round the radio. It's time now for another installment of A Touch of Gray, the talk show for grown-ups. My name is Michael Harrison. It's my privilege to serve as anchor of the program. It's an ensemble show with lots of good people involved, and the host and founder of the show is Carol Marks. Carol Marks is one of America's leading experts on upper demographic issues, and she's a champion in the battle against ageism. Continuing now with A Touch of Gray, the talk show for grown-ups. I'm Michael Harrison in the anchor chair. And here, as promised, is our senior correspondent, Richard Neer, in conversation with Meryl Comer. She's an Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist and leading Alzheimer's advocate. And she's going to talk to Richard about her new book titled Slow Dancing with a Stranger, Lost and Found in the Age of Alzheimer's, published by Harper One.
When did you first suspect that this was something more than just the normal aging process with your husband?
Rick, I need to put it in perspective. If you go back 20 years, there was such stigma around the disease, Alzheimer's, that you search for everything but the disease because as it exists today, there is nothing to treat. The symptoms were behavioral, and it typically starts that way for most families. The patient becomes self-absorbed. They're fighting for control. It'll take them longer to do things that were typically very simple for them. They'll get lost on routes to the office, and they've been going there for 30 years. Simple things. Or a smart man doesn't know where to sign the check. These are all telltale signs that something is going on in terms of the short-term memory. A very unusual for early onset. Alzheimer's is a neurodegenerative disease, and you typically see it in the 70s and 80s, but it starts in your 50s. What you're seeing with early onset are better diagnostics of being able to pick it up. So this is a disease that creeps up on you, why it is so difficult to manage, because smart people do try to hide out. And with early onset, they don't present. It's atypical. Oh, you have stress, or take a vacation, do something else. Maybe you have Lyme disease, mad cow's disease. There's really a search for every diagnosis, but because, let's be very honest, everyone views it as a death sentence. There's nothing to treat, incurable, and a loss of who we are. So it's a devastating disease, but it has come of age with baby boomers. Here we are, turning 65 at the rate of 4 million a year. And now we have an epidemic brewing, and that's true globally. So it's a huge, huge issue.
And in early onset, generally, it's a very steep decline. It takes 3 to 5 years from the diagnosis till the end. But your husband has been there for 20 years now. Can you give some reasons, some explanations, some things that you did that might help others?
Well, first of all, with early onset, people need to understand that it is typically genetic. We were unaware of an issue in the family, but the steep decline is because people are stronger, able to hold on longer, and when they do, it's like they fall off a cliff. So that's why you talk about a precipitous decline in a very short period of time, because they've been hiding out for a very long time. My husband was strong, very athletic, lean. He maintained his brain. He did everything that we should all do just for what's good for our heart. And it is really very specific to the individual. And he also was taken care of at home, so there were no secondary infections. And I weaned him off of all antipsychotics. The first thing that happens if an Alzheimer's patient is difficult in any way is the facilities give someone an antipsychotic. And I had him at home and was managing a man that, because he was strong, because he was young, was so difficult that nobody wanted us. So I had an extreme of an early onset case.
And the terrible thing, and I know this, my mother died of Alzheimer's, and we have some good friends who are taking care of their mother-in-law in this case, and the personality change. I mean, she went from being, a normal mother-in-law to being very aggressive, very mean-spirited, very abusive to the very people who are taking care of her.
Well, I'm sorry you share the experience, but what we find is because of that personality change, and I have to tell you that I've also take care of my mother. I take care of both my husband and my mother, so I've seen it young and old. Let's put them in an institutional environment. My mother, who I admire, is prickly and nasty. Do you think people want to engage with her? No. So they get neglected, and they're the ultimate victim, but it's that personality change and people moving in and out. Now, some very difficult people can become charming, but I haven't witnessed that. I haven't witnessed that version.
Yeah. Well, that happened with my mother, actually, because my mother was difficult, and as the disease set in, she became much more affectionate. She did go through a period of trying to kill my father, where she thought he was her father. But, as she got a little bit more into the disease, she became very gentle and very loving, which she never really was much during her earlier years. So it can go both ways, obviously.
Well, let's be honest. Every family tries to keep a loved one at home. And then typically there's an episode, not unlike the situation where someone tries to strangle them. They don't know who they are. They're losing ground and their sense of reality, or their children involved, especially with early onset. So there are many considerations that force a family just to say, I can't do this anymore. And anyone who has taken care of a loved one with this disease understands when somebody says, I can't do this anymore. And that's why you have institutionalization. And again, you have two choices. You manage the care or you manage the institution. And I know if you visited, you've seen family members there feeding, sharing the care because of the nature of the disease. And it is bankrupting. I think it's a wake-up call for boomers who, from the statistics I've read, Rick, retire with about $6,000 in savings. They assume Medicare is going to pick up the cost, but long-term care in this disease is all out of pocket, and it's a wake-up call for our generation.
Well, that's the frightening thing, because no matter how much money you've put aside, you see the cost of a home. In my mother's case, it was about $144,000 a year, and then we eventually moved her into having a full-time caretaker. Along with my sister, who spent a lot of time with her. But it's just, you're totally right. It's bankrupting. And the scary thing about long-term care insurance is you don't know if these companies are going to be around when it eventually hits, if it does.
Yes, and you just do the math. I always tell, my husband did not have long-term care insurance. So all our planning and portfolio, we've run through that. Today I still do a 12-hour shift and take care of both my husband and my mother, who are totally invalid. But I don't do it for my health. And what I'm learning now is, having written the book, and when I look back, nothing has changed. I was 49 years old, sort of that sandwich generation, and I had to leave my career. Well, that's what's happening today. No better options 20 years later. I think our generation needs to say this disease is unacceptable, because this is legacy. We are leaving a burden to our children that we have to really say, time's up. We need a war. We did a war on cancer. We had it on HIV/AIDS, and I've become, as you can tell, quite the advocate, because I need to flip the pain. It is very painful to watch a loved one dissolve slowly in front of your eyes and not know who you are.
Yeah, that's the difficult part. And even though you intellectually tell yourself the abuse, the language, all of this stuff is not personal, it's just a result of the disease, it's really hard not to react to it in the way that you should, because
you're right.
You're hearing the words.
We're human too.
That's Meryl Comer in conversation with Richard Neer. Her book is titled Slow Dancing with a Stranger, Lost and Found in the Age of Alzheimer's, published by Harper One.